A woman boards an ultra-exclusive $75 million private jet and sees a young black girl in sweats sitting in the main cabin. Disgusted, she spends the next 2 hours harassing the girl, bullying her, and demanding the flight attendant have her removed. But she's about to find out a devastating secret. She is on that flight to close the biggest deal of her life, a deal she's pitching to one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. What she doesn't know is that the girl she's harassing is his daughter. And the CIO? He doesn't just have a seat on the jet. He owns it. This is the story of Caroline Harrington and the hard karma that ended her career at 30,000 feet. The Westwood Executive Airport wasn't an airport in the traditional sense. There was no TSA, no screaming babies, and no 300-yard dash to gate C-47. It was a hushed cathedral of polished marble, brushed steel, and silent, discreet staff who materialized from unseen doors. The air smelled of expensive, freshly ground coffee and the faint, leathery aroma of new money. Maya Washington sat in a deep armchair, her knees pulled up to her chest. She was 19. Her outfit was one of high-end, anonymous comfort. Charcoal grey joggers from a brand only fashion insiders knew, an oversized NYU hoodie, and a pair of pristine, limited edition Nikes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple puff, and a pair of Bose headphones covered her ears, though no music was playing. She was sketching in a leather-bound book, the complex, turbine-like architecture of the Gulfstream GS100, waiting just beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The quiet of the lounge was shattered by the click-clack of aggressive heels and a voice that seemed designed to curb-stomp silence. "I told him, Mark, if the preliminary numbers aren't on my desk by the time we land in LA, the entire ancillary deal is off. I don't care if his dog died. Buy him a new dog." Caroline "Caro" Harrington burst into the lounge, a whirlwind of beige cashmere, sharp tailoring, and a perfume that entered the room 5 seconds before she did. She was 42, blonde, and wielded her ambition like a weapon. Behind her scurried Mark, a man in his late 20s whose entire personality seemed to be anxious agreement. "Absolutely, Caro. You're right. It's unprofessional," Mark murmured, juggling her briefcase and his own. Caroline snapped her phone shut and surveyed the lounge. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, scanned the empty chairs, the complimentary bar, and then, with a sudden, jarring halt, they landed on Maya. Her face, which had been set in a mask of corporate aggression, tightened. A small, almost imperceptible sneer curled her upper lip. She didn't look away. She stared, her gaze traveling from Maya's Nikes, up the joggers, to the NYU logo, and finally to her face. Maya met her gaze, held it for a beat, and then, with a practiced weariness that was sad for someone so young, she simply looked back down at her sketchbook. Caroline leaned into Mark, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that was louder than most people's normal speech. "My God," she hissed. "Standards have completely evaporated, haven't they?" Mark, following her eyeline, looked nervously at Maya. Caro, maybe she's what, Mark? A competition winner? Did they start a frequent flyer charity program? This is supposed to be Westwood. It's a sanctuary. I'm paying. Well, the firm is paying. A premium for an exclusive sterile environment. Sterile environment hung in the air, a chemical-clean, offensive phrase. "I'm sure it's fine," Mark said, desperate to change the subject. "That's our jet, right? The G700? Beautiful." "It's adequate," Caroline said, already marching toward the door, her eyes fixed on the Gulf Stream. "It's not the Bombardier Global 8000 I requested, but it'll do, as long as the service is competent." She shot one last look over her shoulder at Maya. "Honestly," she said to Mark, "it's just diluting the brand. When you let in people who clearly can't afford it, It makes you wonder what other corners they're cutting. Maya closed her sketchbook. Her hand was shaking, just slightly. She'd heard variations of this monologue her entire life. At her prep school, at the gates of her family's neighborhood, in stores on Fifth Avenue. It was a familiar, toxic hum, the background radiation of her existence. Boarding for flight 771 Alpha, non-stop to Los Angeles, is now available, a discreet voice announced. Caroline and Mark went first. Maya stood up, slung her backpack over one shoulder, and followed them onto the tarmac, the smell of jet fuel cutting through the crisp New York air. She was just trying to get home for her fall break. That's all. She just wanted to get home. The interior of the G700 was less an aircraft cabin and more a flying luxury apartment. Cream-colored leather, dark polished wood, and accents of brushed platinum. There were only 14 seats, each a private pod with a lie-flat bed, a personal minibar, and a 24-inch screen. Maya walked past Caroline, who was already in seat 2A, barking at Mark to get her laptop stowed just so. Maya continued to the back of the small exclusive cabin, where a 4-person conference setup was located. She preferred this spot. It had a large divan-style seat, opposite 2 regular seats. She settled into the divan by the window and pulled out her sketchbook again. It was her armor. A flight attendant named Sarah, with a warm smile and infinitely patient eyes, approached her. "Ms. Washington? A pleasure to have you back on board. Can I get you anything before takeoff? A sparkling water, perhaps?" "I'm okay. Thank you, Sarah," Maya said, giving her a small, grateful smile. "Maybe just some still water after we're up." "Of course." From 2 rows up, Caroline's head snapped around. She had watched the interaction, her eyes narrowing at Sarah's use of Ms. Washington and the familiar "welcome back." So the girl flies this route often, Caroline thought, a new, more venomous theory forming. She's someone's mistress, some old, rich white man. It's the only explanation. This conclusion settled in her mind as absolute fact, and it made her feel even more repulsed. She hit her call button. The ding was sharp. Sarah, who was just securing the galley, walked back. "Yes, Miss Harrington." "A problem," Caroline said, not bothering to look at Sarah, instead gesturing with a dismissive wave of her hand toward the back of the plane. "With that passenger." Sarah's smile became professional. "Is there an issue, ma'am?" "The issue," Caroline said, finally making eye contact, "is that I find her presence distracting. This is a flight for high-level executives. I am on this charter to prepare for the single most important meeting of my career. I need focus." Sarah was confused. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't understand. She's just sitting—" "She shouldn't be here," Caroline cut in, her voice low and sharp. "I don't know what arrangement she has, but she is clearly not a peer. She looks like she just rolled out of a dorm room." Mark, in the seat across from her, whispered, "Caro, please, just leave it." "I will not leave it, Mark. This is the Apex Innovations pitch. We are flying to meet Robert Washington. Do you have any idea how much this deal is worth? It's not just our bonuses, it's the firm. I will not have my concentration broken by scenery." Maya could hear every word. The cabin was too small, the silence too absolute. Caroline's voice too piercing. She sank lower into the divan, her knuckles white as she gripped her pencil. Sarah, a 15-year veteran of commercial first class and the last 5 in private aviation, knew exactly what this was. "Ma'am," she said, her voice firm but polite. "Ms. Washington is a confirmed and ticketed passenger. She is seated in her assigned area. I can offer to move you to the other divan at the front of the cabin if you'd prefer." Caroline looked at her as if she'd just suggested she fly on the wing. Move me? You want to move me? I am the client. She is the accessory. Why don't you move her? Put her in the crew jump seat. Put her in the galley, I don't care. Just get her out of my line of sight. Ma'am, that is absolutely not possible, Sarah said, her patience now visibly fraying. I will not ask another passenger to move from their assigned seat. Then you are useless, Caroline snapped. What is the point of paying $20,000 for a seat if you have to share the air with that? Get me the pilot. I want to speak to the pilot. The captain is preparing for takeoff, Miss Harrington. He is not available. Now I must ask you to fasten your seatbelt. Caroline let out an exaggerated, theatrical huff. Fine. Fine. But I am lodging a formal, written complaint with NetJets or VistaJet or whoever owns this ridiculous plane. This is an outrage. Sarah simply nodded. As you wish, mine. She walked to the front, and the jet began to taxi. Caroline twisted in her seat, glaring back at Maya, who was now staring resolutely out the window, watching the runway lights blur past. Unbelievable, Caroline muttered to Mark, loud enough to carry. Probably some little diversity quota filler. They're everywhere now, lowering the bar for everyone. Mark just put his head in his hands. He knew this pitch was doomed, not because of Maya, but because his boss was a ticking time bomb. The flight was 5 hours. For Maya, it was an eternity. For the first hour, Caroline never stopped. She would use the restroom at the front of the plane, and on her way back, she would accidentally stumble, grabbing the back of Maya's seat, jolting her. Oh, so sorry, she'd drip, her voice all venom and saccharine. She complained to Sarah that the Wi-Fi was unacceptably slow. I am trying to download a multi-billion-dollar prospectus, and it's crawling, she announced. She then looked directly at Maya. Perhaps your other passenger could stop streaming whatever it is she's streaming, so those of us with actual work can get it done. Maya wasn't streaming. Her laptop was in her bag. Her phone was in her hand, the screen dark. After the third accidental bump to her chair, Maya finally had enough. She unbuckled, stood up, and walked past Caroline's seat to the galley, where Sarah was polishing glasses. Sarah? Maya's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Yes, Ms. Washington. Can I get you that water? Yes, please. But also, is there any way? Can you just ask her to stop? Maya hated how small her voice sounded. She keeps talking about me and bumping my seat. I'm just trying to read. Sarah's face was a mask of professional empathy. I am so sorry you are dealing with this. I've logged her behavior. I've tried to intervene. But as you can see, she is insistent. The best I can do is ask you to ignore her. We'll be in LA in 4 hours. Can I make you up the lie-flat bed? You could put on a movie. Get some sleep? Maya shook her head. No, I can't sleep. I'll just go back. She returned to her seat. As she sat, Caroline's voice lanced out again, this time to Mark. See? Now she's complaining about me. To the staff. The entitlement is breathtaking. Maya's eyes filled with hot, angry tears. She refused to let them fall. She pulled out her phone and sent a text. Maya. Hey Dad, you busy? A reply came almost instantly. Her dad was always on. Dad. Never for you, Munchkin. What's up? How's the flight? Maya. It's not great. It's happening again. There was a pause. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared twice before the reply came. Dad. Define it's happening again. The New York to LA Racism Express. Maya. Yep. A woman in 2A. She's awful. Told the FA I was diluting the brand and asked for me to be moved to the galley. Dad. She said what? Maya. It's fine. I'm used to it. but she keeps making comments, loud ones, to her associate, and she accidentally bumps my seat. Dad, what's her name? Maya. I don't know. Sarah called her Ms. Harrington. She's loud, blonde, cashmere, very angry. This time the pause was so long, Maya thought he'd been pulled into a meeting. Dad. Blonde? Mid-40s? With a nervous-looking guy named Mark, Maya's blood went cold. Maya. Yes, how did you know that? Dad. Her name is Carolyn Harrington. She's a VP from Sterling Price. She's flying to LA to pitch me. Maya stared at the screen. The entire horrific cosmic irony of the situation settled on her like a lead blanket. The woman who was harassing her for not belonging was on this plane only to impress her father. Maya. Oh, wow. This is awkward. Dad. It's not awkward. It's infuriating. I'm livid, Maya. You should not have to endure this. Not from anyone, and damn sure not from someone who wants $500 million of my company's business. Maya. Dad, no, please don't. Don't say anything. It'll make it worse. It'll be a whole scene. I just want to get to LA. Please, just let it go. Dad, Maya, I am not letting this go. She is harassing my daughter on my own plane. This is not a NetJets charter, Maya. This is N77 Alpha Whiskey. This is our jet. She is a guest, and she is harassing the owner's family. No, I'm not letting it go. Makya, what are you going to do? Don't call the plane. Please, I die of embarrassment. Dad, I'm not calling the plane. I'm changing the flight plan. Sarah will get a notification from the cockpit in about 10 minutes. Just put your headphones on. And this time, actually play some music. Turn it up. I'll see you sooner than you think. Maya. Dad. What does that mean? Dad? No reply. Maya's heart was pounding. Sooner than you think? They were 3 hours from LA. What was he doing? A new wave of dread and something else. A cold, sharp sense of anticipation settled over her. She did as he said. She put her headphones on, synced them, and turned on a playlist. The heavy beat of a hip-hop track filled her ears, and for the first time, she closed her eyes and blocked Carolyn Harrington out. 2 hours later, they were supposed to be starting their descent into Van Nuys. Caroline was clacking away on her laptop, her face a mask of concentration. She was finalizing the presentation. It was, in her opinion, a masterpiece. It was aggressive, it was brilliant, and it would secure the Apex Innovations account, making her the most powerful woman at her firm. Robert Washington wouldn't know what hit him. Suddenly, the soft ding of the cabin chime sounded, and Sarah's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your flight attendant. The captain has asked me to inform you that we have a slight change in our flight plan. We will not be landing in Los Angeles at this time. We are beginning our initial descent for Scottsdale, Arizona. We'll be on the ground in approximately 20 minutes. Caroline's head snapped up. Her laptop wobbled on the tray table. What did she say? She demanded of Mark. Scottsdale? Why are we landing in Scottsdale? Is it a medical emergency? Mark looked around, panicked. Caroline hit the call button so hard, it was a wonder the plastic didn't crack. Sarah appeared almost instantly. What is the meaning of this? Caroline demanded. Scottsdale, I have a 4 p.m. meeting in Los Angeles, a meeting with Robert Washington. This is not a suggestion. It is the most important meeting of my year. You will tell that pilot to continue to LA immediately. Sarah's face was perfectly, placidly calm. I'm sorry, ma'am. The diversion was requested by the aircraft's owner. Caroline was dumbfounded. The owner? What owner? This is a charter. Who at FlexJet or Vista or wherever had the audacity to reroute my flight? This is a gross breach of contract. Ma'am, Sarah said, her voice dropping a half octave. This is not a charter flight. This is a privately owned and operated aircraft, registered to the Apex Innovations Group. All flight plans are at the discretion of the owner. We were instructed to land in Scottsdale. We are landing in Scottsdale. Please stow your tray table and laptop for landing." The words hit Caroline like a series of physical blows. Apex, Innovations, Group, privately owned. Her mind was spinning, trying to connect the dots. Robert Washington, Apex, this plane. She was on Robert Washington's plane. He had sent his personal jet for her. This was incredible. It meant the deal was practically closed. But then, why Scottsdale? "He must be there," she said to Mark, her panic instantly evaporating, replaced by a giddy, manic energy. "He's in Scottsdale. He's surprising us. It's a test, or maybe he's golfing. Oh, this is brilliant." She looked back at Maya. The girl was still there, headphones on, looking out the window. Caroline's lip curled again. He brought his mistress along, she thought, the theory now cemented in her mind, uglier than before. He sent his jet for me, but he had his side piece already on board. How tacky. Men are such pigs, even billionaires. This new narrative explained everything. The girl's presence, the diversion. Robert was picking her up and dropping the girl off. It was a swap. "Well," Caroline said, smoothing her skirt, a smug, triumphant smile on her face. "This just got very interesting. Mark, get the briefcases ready. We're meeting the man himself." She looked at Sarah. "Tell the pilot to make it a fast landing. Mr. Washington doesn't like to be kept waiting." Sarah just stared at her. "Please fasten your seatbelt, Ms. Harrington." As the G700 banked hard to the east, away from the California coast and toward the Arizona desert, Maya Washington finally took her headphones off. The cabin was silent, save for the hum of the engines. She knew exactly what was happening. Her dad wasn't in Scottsdale. He was in New York. He had just flown to Scottsdale from New York, a 4.5-hour flight, in his other jet, the faster Bombardier Global 7500, just to meet them on the tarmac. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Her father was a calm, kind man. But when he was angered, his calmness didn't break. It became colder. It became a force of nature. And this was a hurricane-level event. The woman in 2A had no idea what was waiting for her. The Gulfstream's wheels touched the tarmac at Scottsdale Airport with barely a whisper. The heat of the Arizona desert shimmered off the runway. Caroline was already on her feet before the jet had even taxied to the private terminal, applying a fresh coat of lipstick and adjusting her blazer. "He's here, Mark. He's here. Be sharp. No, let me talk. You just nod and look smart," she ordered. "You got it, Caro." The jet came to a stop. The engines spooled down. Maya remained seated, slowly packing her sketchbook into her backpack. She was in no hurry. Come on," Caroline muttered, tapping her foot. The thud hiss of the cabin door unsealing echoed through the jet. Sarah pulled the heavy door open, and the bright, blinding Arizona sun flooded the entryway. Standing at the bottom of the steps was a man. He was tall, dressed not in a suit, but in dark jeans, a black quarter-zip pullover, and sunglasses. He was fit, imposing, and he had an aura of such absolute, unshakable authority that Caroline felt her breath catch. She had only seen him in Forbes and Fortune magazine photos. It was him, Robert Washington. "Mr. Washington," Caroline gushed, grabbing her briefcase from Mark and muscling her way past Sarah to be the first one at the door. "What an inspired surprise. I am Caroline Harrington. It is an absolute honor to finally meet you in person." She beamed, her teeth a perfect, white, predatory smile. Robert Washington did not smile. He slowly took off his sunglasses, his eyes adjusting to the dimmer light of the cabin. He looked right at Caroline, He held her gaze for a full 5 seconds, his expression unreadable, but the weight of his stare was crushing. Then his eyes moved past her. He stepped onto the plane, brushing by Caroline so closely that she had to physically recoil to avoid being knocked over. He ignored her outstretched hand. He ignored Mark. He walked straight down the aisle, his gaze locked on the girl in the back. Caroline's smile froze, her hand still hovering in the air. She watched, her brain short-circuiting, unable to process the scene. Robert Washington stopped at Maya's divan. The 19-year-old girl in the sweats looked up. A slow, warm smile finally broke across Robert's face. It transformed him from an icon of industry into a father. "You okay, Munchkin?" he asked, his voice so cold a moment ago, now full of paternal warmth. Maya nodded, a small, relieved smile on her own face. "I'm fine, Dad. You're insane. You flew all the way here?" "Planes are fast when you own them," he said, leaning down. He kissed her on the forehead. "You ready to get out of here?" "Yeah, I am." Robert took her backpack from her, slinging it over his own shoulder. He then turned, his arm around his daughter's shoulder, and looked back up the aisle. Caroline Harrington was white as a sheet. Her mouth was open. Her eyes were wide, darting from Robert to Maya and back again. The mistress theory, the diversity hire theory, all of it evaporated, replaced by a single, catastrophic, career-ending word. "Dad, that's your," Caroline stammered, pointing a shaking finger. "She's your daughter." "She is," Robert Washington said. His voice was no longer warm. It was ice. It was the sound of a vault door slamming shut. "Miss Harrington," he said, walking slowly up the aisle toward her, Maya at his side. "I believe you've already met Maya, though from what I understand, the introduction was unpleasant." I didn't..." Caroline was sputtering, her high-powered vocabulary utterly failing her. "I had no idea. It was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Robert stopped, standing directly in front of her. He was 6'2", and he seemed to fill the entire cabin. "Please, clarify it for me. What exactly did you misunderstand?" I didn't know she was your daughter." The words, meant to be an excuse, were an admission. "Ah," Robert said, nodding slowly. "There it is. So the harassment, the insults, the demanding she be moved to the galley, that's all perfectly acceptable behavior for you, as long as the victim isn't related to someone you need something from?" "No, that's not what I meant." "You meant," Robert continued, his voice dangerously soft, "that you saw a young black woman in a setting you believe is reserved only for people who look like you. And you decided she didn't belong. You decided she was diluting the brand. You decided she was staff, or a mistress, or scenery. Mr. Washington, I assure you." "You," Robert cut her off, his voice rising just enough to make Mark flinch, "are the exact kind of person I built Apex to dismantle. The kind of lazy, entitled, prejudiced thinking that values appearance over substance. The kind of person who assumes a 19-year-old girl in a hoodie couldn't possibly belong in your world. When the truth is, Miss Harrington, you are not even a guest in her world." He gestured around the multi-million-dollar cabin. "This is her plane, Miss Harrington. You are just baggage she was forced to carry." The silence that descended upon the cabin was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical presence. It was a thick, crushing, 30,000-foot pressure vacuum that sucked all the air, all the arrogance, and all the blood from Caroline Harrington's face. She was no longer a high-powered executive. She was a specimen, pinned to a board, every eye in the cabin, Mark's, Sarah's, Robert's, and Maya's, on her. Her brain, a fine-tuned instrument of corporate warfare and brutal takedowns, went into catastrophic failure. It was blue screening. It tried to find a file, a script, a protocol for this, and found nothing. Dad. The word echoed. It was a joke. It was impossible. This child in the NYU hoodie, and Robert Washington, the billionaire icon, the legend she was about to pitch. Then the connections, which her prejudice had so efficiently blocked, all slammed into place at once. Ms. Washington, a pleasure to have you back on board. The private jet registration, N77 Alpha Whiskey. The owner, Apex Innovations Group. It wasn't a charter. She wasn't a client. She was cargo. Caroline's face, a mask of mottled, furious red only moments before, had gone a waxy, translucent, terrifying white. Her perfectly lipsticked mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was a fish, pulled from the water, drowning in the air of her own consequence. You're, Caroline stammered, a shaking, manicured finger pointing at Maya. The gesture was rude, accusatory, and above all pathetic. That's your daughter? Robert Washington did not raise his voice. He did not have to. His voice, now stripped of all warmth, was the quiet, cold sound of a glacier calving. She is, he said, his eyes locked on hers. He took a half-step closer, forcing her to tilt her head back to look up at him. But you already knew her name, didn't you, Ms. Harrington? You just didn't think it mattered. No. I had no idea, Caroline burst out, her voice a desperate, strangled squeak. It was a misunderstanding, a simple misunderstanding. This, she thought, was the out, the eject button, an appeal to the civilized, we're all professionals here, code. Robert Washington actually nodded, a slow, terrifyingly calm motion. A misunderstanding, he repeated. Please, clarify it for me. What exactly did you misunderstand? I didn't know she was your daughter, she finally wailed, the words tearing out of her. It was an excuse. It was, she thought, the only one that mattered. Ah, Robert said. The sound was soft, but it landed like a physical blow. There it is. The truth. He let the admission hang in the sterile, recycled air for a full 10 seconds. Caroline visibly wilted. So, to be clear, Robert continued, his voice a surgeon's scalpel, the behavior, the harassment, the insults, the stage whispers to your associate, the demanding that a passenger be moved to the galley like she's a piece of trash. That's all perfectly acceptable, professional behavior for you. Your one and only mistake, your single regret, is that you did it to the wrong person's daughter. No, that's not what I meant, Caroline shrieked, her composure shattering, her voice cracking into a register of pure panic. You meant... Robert cut her off, his voice rising, not to a yell, but to a tone of such absolute, final authority that it vibrated in her teeth. That you saw a young black woman in a setting you believe is reserved only for people who look like you, and you decided, with the full, lazy, arrogant weight of your prejudice, that she did not belong. He took another step. Caroline instinctively took one back, her calf hitting her own seat. She was trapped. You decided she was diluting the brand. You decided she was distracting. You decided she was... What was the word you used to your associate in the lounge? Oh, yes. Scenery. You sized up a 19-year-old girl, and in your world, the only slots you had available for her were staff, charity case, or mistress. You never for 1 second considered owner. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a confidential, lethal whisper. You are the exact kind of person I built Apex Innovations to dismantle. The kind of person who is so blinded by your own reflection that you can't see the talent, the value, the humanity, right in front of you. You look at my daughter and you see a problem. I look at her and I see the future. I see a brilliant young woman who, by the age of 19, already has more class, more intelligence, and more right to be in this seat than you will ever have in your entire life. He gestured around the platinum and leather cabin. This is her plane, Miss Harrington. This is her world. You are not even a guest here. You are just baggage she was forced to carry. The finality of the statement was absolute. It was an execution. Caroline's eyes darted, wildly, looking for an ally, for anyone. She looked at Mark Jensen, her associate, her protégé, the man whose entire career was in her handbag, had gone from pale to a ghostly, clammy grey. He was sweating through his $800 shirt. When her eyes met his, he didn't just look away. He unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up, and he took one definitive, shuffling step away from her, into the aisle, as if to create a visible, physical boundary between her and him. It was a small movement, but it was the most profound betrayal Caroline had ever witnessed. "Mr. Washington," Mark squeaked, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of surrender. "Mr. Washington, sir, I want to be perfectly clear. I did not share any of Miss Harrington's opinions. None of them. I found them reprehensible, appalling. I was just... I told her, 'Caro, please,' I said." Robert Washington's head snapped toward Mark, his gaze so cold it instantly froze the younger man's lies in his throat. "Did you?" Robert asked, his voice flat. "Did you tell her to stop? Did you tell her she was being a racist? Did you tell her to leave my daughter alone? Or did you just sit there, in total silence, nodding and whispering, 'Absolutely, Caro,' hoping she'd be quiet long enough for you to get your bonus?" Mark's mouth opened and closed. A small, desperate sound came out. He had no answer. "That's what I thought," Robert said, dismissing him with the same contempt he'd shown Caroline. He turned his full, undivided attention back to her. She was a wreck. Her eyes were wide, tears of pure, unadulterated terror and humiliation welling, threatening to ruin her expensive mascara. She tried one last time, the only card she had left. The proposal," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the laptop still open on her tray table. "The Apex merger. Mr. Washington, it's brilliant. The Q4 projections, the logistics synergy. It's a $500 million idea. It will revolutionize." "I'm sure it's brilliant," Robert said. He reached out, not to take it, but to tap the lid of her laptop with one finger, a gesture of final, dismissive punctuation. "But I'll never see it." He pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't check the screen. He hit a single button on his favorites. The call connected instantly. "Alex," he said, his voice calm, all business. "It's Robert. Listen, the Sterling Price pitch for the Apex merger, it's dead. Terminate the discussion." Caroline let out a strangled, involuntary gasp. "No." Robert raised a hand to silence her, his eyes locked on hers as he continued his call. "No, Alex, I don't mean postpone. I mean the deal is dead. And so is the relationship. I want you to call Stephen Price. Yes, their CEO. You have his private number. And inform him that Apex Innovations is terminating all existing contracts, service agreements, and outstanding MSAs with Sterling Price, effective immediately. Cite the ethics and conduct clause. Yes, all of them. We're blacklisting the firm." Caroline was now openly shaking. No, please. "I don't care about the termination penalty, Alex. Pay it," Robert continued, his eyes still on Caroline, forcing her to witness her own immolation. I want their name out of our portfolio by end of day. Yes, I'm very sure. The liability is unacceptable. I'll explain later. Make it happen." He hung up. He slid the phone back into his pocket. The silence that returned was the silence of a tomb. You're... Caroline's mind couldn't even form the sentence. My entire firm, your blacklisting, my company, because of me?" "Yes," Robert said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Because of you. But more importantly, because of the culture that produced you. A culture that taught you that this behavior was not only acceptable, but rewarded. I do not partner with firms that poison the well, Miss Harrington. I do not do business with people like you. Your firm's failure to vet your character is a business liability. And I, as you know, am ruthless about cutting liability." He nodded toward the open door of the jet, the bright, unforgiving Arizona sun blazing just beyond it. "This is where you get off." The words were so simple, so mundane, they didn't register. "What?" she whispered. "Here? In Scottsdale. But our luggage, our flight to L.A. We can't." "Sarah," Robert called, not taking his eyes off Caroline. Sarah, who had been standing in the galley, a silent, grimly satisfied witness to the entire exchange, stepped forward immediately. "Yes, Mr. Washington?" "Please have Miss Harrington's and Mr." He glanced at Mark. "I'm sorry, I didn't get your name." "Mark!" he squeaked. "Mark Jensen." "And Mr. Jensen's luggage removed from the cargo hold and left on the tarmac. They will not be continuing to Los Angeles." "With absolute pleasure, sir," Sarah said. The mask of professional deference was gone, replaced by the satisfaction of a justice she had waited her entire career to see. This finally, irreversibly, broke Caroline. The dam of her arrogance, her pride, her entire constructed identity, shattered. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, her voice a raw, animalistic sound of pure panic. This is insane! I'll be stranded! You'll ruin me! You'll ruin my career!" "You ruined yourself, Miss Harrington," Robert said, his voice quiet again. "You did it in the lounge in New York. You did it for 2 hours on this flight. You just didn't know who was watching." He turned his gaze to Mark, who looked like he was about to vomit. "You," Robert said. "You're young. Learn from this. The people you step on the way up, the people you fail to defend, you will always meet them on the way down. And sometimes, they're the ones who own the ladder." He jerked his chin toward the door. "Get off my plane." Mark Jensen did not hesitate. He did not look at Caroline. He did not say a word. He grabbed his briefcase, stumbled past Robert, and nearly fell down the air stairs in his haste to escape. He was a rat, fleeing a ship he had helped sink. Caroline was alone. Utterly. She was frozen in the aisle, a statue of a woman whose world had just ended. Tears were now streaming down her face, cutting chaotic, white-clear paths through her expensive foundation. "Sarah," Robert said, his voice gentle. Sarah stepped forward, her face firm but not unkind. "Miss Harrington. This way, please." Defeated, hollow, and utterly broken, Caroline Harrington fumbled for her briefcase. Her hands were shaking so violently, she could barely grasp the handle. She did not look at Maya. She could not. She walked, her steps wooden and shuffling, toward the door. Each step was an eternity. She was a queen, deposed, being marched to her own execution. She reached the top of the stairs and paused, looking out at the blinding, indifferent desert. It was the end of everything. "Miss Harrington," Sarah said, one last time from behind her. "Move." And she did. The thud hiss of the G700's door sealing was not just a sound, it was a pneumatic guillotine, severing Caroline Harrington from the life she had just, moments ago, so completely inhabited. She stumbled down the metal air stairs, her $1,200 Manolo Blahnik heels, once a symbol of her corporate dominance, now treacherous liabilities on the grooved metal. When her feet hit the tarmac, the heat of the Arizona desert rose through the soles of her shoes in a way that felt like a personal assault. It was over 100 degrees, a dry, suffocating, convection oven heat that sucked the moisture from her throat. The acrid smell of jet fuel and hot asphalt filled her nostrils. A high-pitched, deafening whine filled her ears. The Gulfstream's Auxiliary Power Unit, or APU. It was the sound of a plane that was very much alive and preparing to leave. She saw Mark, her former associate, already 50 yards away, scurrying like a rat toward the cool, shimmering glass of the private terminal. He had his phone clamped to his ear, his back to her. Even from this distance, she could hear the desperate, high-pitched panic in his voice as he threw her to the wolves. "Stephen, yes, it's Mark Jensen. From Caro's team. Listen to me, it was all her. I swear on my life. She was unhinged. I tried to tell her. Caro, stop, I said. She's a total liability. I had nothing to do with it. I was a hostage. You have to believe me." A new, colder kind of nausea twisted in Caroline's stomach. It was the icy realization of her absolute, profound aloneness. The man whose bonuses she had personally tripled, whose career she had single-handedly built, was tap-dancing on her corporate grave before her body was even cold. A baggage cart zipped up beside her, driven by a man in a sweat-stained polo shirt and wraparound sunglasses. He didn't look at her. He didn't speak. He simply, and with a practiced, weary indifference, grabbed her $5,000 Rimowa trunk and Mark's matching carry-on from the cart's bed and unceremoniously dropped them onto the filthy tarmac. The thump of the aluminum cases on the concrete was a sound of pathetic finality. He gave a short, acknowledging wave toward the jet's cockpit, then spun the cart around and drove off, shaking his head. Caroline was left standing in a puddle of her own abject humiliation. The whine of the APU died, only to be replaced by a sound that was infinitely more terrifying. The two massive Rolls-Royce engines on the G700's tail began to spool up. It was a deep, building shout of power, a multi-million-dollar testament to its complete and utter indifference to her. The jet blast, even from this distance, hit her like a physical push, a wave of superheated air that whipped her blonde hair across her face and nearly tore her briefcase from her numb fingers. She watched as the silver jet, her chariot to glory, began to taxi, its movements fluid and impossibly elegant. It turned onto the runway, paused for a moment, as if to gather its strength, and then, with a deafening roar that shook her to her bones, it launched itself into the sky, a silver dagger aimed directly at the heart of the sun. In less than 30 seconds, it was just a disappearing glint. Then, silence. The sudden, crushing quiet of the airfield was worse than the noise. It was a vacuum, filled only by the shimmer of the heat on the asphalt and the distant, mocking hum of the terminal's air conditioning. She was a statue, a monument to her own arrogance. Her phone vibrated in her suit pocket. It was a toxic, terrifying buzz against her ribs. She pulled it out with a shaking hand. The screen was nearly unreadable in the blinding sun. Call. Stephen H. Price. Stephen, the CEO, the man whose portrait hung in the lobby. She stared at it, her thumb hovering over the accept icon. She couldn't. She physically could not. She did not have the words. She did not have the air. She let it ring and ring and ring until it finally stopped. Ding. A new voicemail. Ding. A new text from Stephen. Call me. Now. Ding. A new email. Her finger, trembling, tapped the email. From Stephen H. Price, spriceestelingprice.com. Subject, notice of immediate termination for cause. The subject line was all she needed to see, but her eyes, against her will, scanned the body. Caroline, I have just concluded a call with Robert Washington of Apex Innovations. Your conduct on his aircraft, N-77-SEBDBW, was not just reprehensible. It constitutes a catastrophic, willful breach of the ethics and conduct clauses of your employment contract, your partnership agreement, and basic human decency. Effective this second, your employment with Sterling Price is terminated. Your access to all firm systems, accounts, and premises is revoked. Your corporate Amex is cancelled. A box of your personal effects from your office will be messengered to your home. Do not, under any circumstances, contact any of our clients. Do not contact any of our staff. Apex has blacklisted this firm, effective immediately. Our legal team will be in touch regarding the financial liabilities incurred by your actions. Financial liabilities. That meant they were coming for her money, her stock options, her deferred comp. The for-cause termination voided her golden parachute. She was not just fired, she was ruined. She finally moved. Her legs felt like they were made of concrete. She bent, grabbed the handle of her suitcase, and began the long walk toward the terminal. The little wheels of the Rimowa rattled mockingly on the uneven tarmac. It was the walk of shame, a 1,000-foot journey across an open expanse where every window, she felt, held a pair of judging eyes. The glass doors of the Scottsdale FBO, fixed base operator, slid open. The blast of refrigerated air was a shock. The lounge was, as she remembered, a hushed cathedral of marble and leather. The young woman at the reception desk, who had checked her in hours earlier, was now studiously not looking at her. Mark was nowhere to be seen. He had likely already found a hole to hide in. "Ma'am?" the receptionist asked, her voice a brittle, professional chirp. "Can I help you with something?" The girl knew. Of course she knew. The entire airport knew. The story of Robert Washington's bombardier landing, of the CEO himself storming onto the G700, of the screaming match. It was already the stuff of FBO legend. I need. Caroline's voice was a dry croak. She cleared her throat. "I need to book a flight. To New York. JFK. The receptionist's smile was tight, devoid of all warmth. "I'm sorry, Mum. This is the executive terminal. For commercial bookings, you'll need to go to Sky Harbor International. It's about a 20-minute Uber ride." Of course, she couldn't even fly from here. She was, quite literally, no longer in the club. That night, Caroline Harrington flew home. Not in a G700, not even in first class. She flew on a 10:40 p.m. red-eye in seat 27B, a middle seat. She was crammed between a 300-pound man who snored like a dying engine and a college student whose headphones bled tinny music into the cabin. She, who had demanded a young woman be moved to a galley because her presence was distracting, was now trapped in the airborne purgatory she so despised. The fallout was nuclear. The story of Tarmac Caro became a cautionary tale whispered in Wall Street steakhouses and Davos lounges. Sterling Price didn't just lose the Apex account. Robert Washington, in a move of quiet, cold-blooded corporate warfare, made 2 calls and had his partners at 2 other multi-billion-dollar pension funds pull their business as well, citing the ethics review. The $500 million Apex deal was the tentpole holding Sterling Price up. Without it, and with Washington actively poisoning the well, the firm bled out. Clients fled, partners defected. Within 6 months, The firm, once a titan, was gutted and absorbed for pennies on the dollar by a less prestigious rival. Stephen H. Price was forced into a humiliating early retirement. The name Sterling Price ceased to exist. Mark Jensen, despite his pathetic, boot-licking phone call, was tainted. He survived the initial purge, but he was the guy who was with Caro. He was seen as weak, a sycophant with no backbone. His fast-track M&A career was over. He was shuffled into the internal compliance department of the new firm, a beige cubicle in a windowless room on a non-partner floor. He was a ghost, his career over before it had truly begun. And Caroline? She was radioactive. No firm would touch her. The for cause termination and the financial liabilities lawsuit from her own firm's board bankrupted her. She sold her Tribeca loft. She sold her art. She was last seen, years later, working as a part-time consultant for a no-name startup in Delaware, living in a rented garden apartment. As for Maya, she sat in the cabin of the G700, now rerouted and soaring toward Los Angeles. Sarah had brought her the sparkling water she had asked for hours ago, and a bowl of warm nuts. "You shouldn't have to endure that, Maya," her father said from the seat opposite her. His face was still hard, the anger from the tarmac not yet faded. "I'm sorry. I put you on that flight. I should have." "It's not your fault she's a racist, Dad," Maya said quietly. She looked out the window at the endless blue. It sucked. It really, really sucked. She paused. "But you have to admit, flying 2,000 miles to Scottsdale just to fire her in person and leave her on the tarmac, that was some next-level Old Testament dad stuff." A small grim smile finally touched Robert's lips. "She wasn't just unprofessional. She wasn't just a bully. She threatened my family. There is no line after that. The business part, the contract, that was just the paperwork. Firing her was the consequence." Maya nodded. She pulled out her sketchbook, turned to a new page, and began to draw. She drew a woman with sharp heels, melting into a hot, desolate runway. 2 years later, at her NYU graduation, Maya Washington accepted a distinction for her senior thesis. It was a stunning, professionally bound graphic novel. Its title, The Girl in 3B. The opening scene was a silent, black and white panel of a girl in a hoodie, sketching in a lounge, as a woman with a voice like broken glass entered the room. The novel wasn't about the fight. It was about the quiet, the observance, and the power of a girl who, by simply existing, exposed the rot in a system. The dedication page was simple. To Dad, who taught me how to fly, and to all the girls in 3B, you belong here. And that is what you call instant karma, served at 30,000 feet. Caroline Harrington learned the hard way that the person you disrespect and underestimate might just be the one who owns the entire plane. She didn't just lose a client, she lost her job, her reputation, and her entire company, all because she couldn't stand to see a young black woman in first class. What would you have done in Maya's or Robert's situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice served, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Make sure to share this with a friend who needs to see it. And most importantly, subscribe and turn on all notifications. We drop new, real-life stories of consequences and karma every single week, and you don't want to miss the next one.